How have you guys tried to really foster community on that team where it's not transactional? These guys are cogs in the wheel, come play, leave. But it's, man, they're buying into the relationships on the team.
I think part of that is almost just innate because being around musicians, there's like a energy that comes from that. You know what I mean? Like people are already passionate about music if they're playing at this level.
Yeah.
And they do love to be around other musicians, right? So that's part of that is like already where maybe some other surf teams there's not a lot in common naturally. I think there is that's natural. And then I think what we do to kind of foster that is because you're right, like if you are around people for as long as we are around the worship team and it's not enjoyable, people will not stick around.
Right.
You know? So we have to be very intentional about people who are onboarding onto the team. Yes, it's like you need to have the talent, right? But also we have an interview for every single team member who joins the team, like an hour-long interview where we are going to just ask you, hey, share your story, share your faith story, share what are you interested in, what are your hobbies. We know that we're going to spend a lot of time and that our team spends a lot of time. So there does have to be like a cultural fit, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's one part of like what we do to kind of foster that like out of the gate. But also we do a lot of like intentional things. Like we have, a team night. So like, hey, once a month or once every 5 or 6 weeks, the teams from all of the campuses come together and, we'll cast vision. I mean, literally just sitting around the table eating and like, we are really, really big on that, just like on culture side of things. And so it's like, man, before you're a drummer, you are a person, you are a child of God, you're a valuable team member.
Good,
So it's like, that is a big part of our ethos.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Pastor Andrew Hopper, and man, this is a podcast about how we want our churches to grow so that they can go. I'm here today with John Azzarello, who is our worship director here at Mercy Hill, and he leads worship, but it's also more of a developmental thing in terms of raising up others to not only lead, but also to be on the team. John, excited that you're here with us. I know you're here thinking you're going to talk about worship team development, but we actually want to know who you voted for in the election. So, no, don't answer. Okay. All right. So anyway, hey, we're picking up on a conversation. John, I want to give you the opportunity to just kind of pick up a little bit of maybe, not necessarily where we left off, but just sort of thinking about the conversation we had, previously on team and development. Man, anything coming out of that conversation that you'd love to just try to kind of pick back up and we can bat around a little bit more before we get into some entirely new content here?
Yeah, I think maybe talking a little bit more about essentials might be helpful. You mentioned before we had a post on our worship's Instagram page about our onboarding process, and it kind of went viral. It had like 150,000 or so, views, and a lot of people. The thing that I was most blown away about was how many people from worship teams all over the world actually messaged just saying, hey, can you send me a copy of your onboarding process? Right. Because they don't have something like that already. And, we talked a little bit about how important it is to know who you are in terms of like your brand or your identity, because anytime you're replicating something, it's kind of important to know exactly what it is that you're replicating. Right. And so, I think that our essentials process has really evolved over the years. I mean, if you go back probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago, we called it pipeline. And I always joke, people who are on the team now who've been on there for a long time, they'll ask like, what did it used to be called before we called it essentials, our onboarding process? And I said pipeline, and they say, why did we call it pipeline? And I said, that's because Andrew would always say, hey man, who's in the pipeline?
Right.
so I was like, okay, pipeline, you shall be called. So that was what we had in a long time. For a long time, it was literally just, somebody would audition and I'd be like, hey, come to practice. And,
hang around.
That was pipeline,
Is it fair? Is this fair? I'm gonna stereotype worship leaders for a minute. Is that cool?
Great.
Is that cool?
Yeah, it's very cool.
Okay, I think if you ask somebody before you stereotype them, then it's okay. Okay, so no, I'm just kidding. But hey, it feels to me like many times the way God wires up people who are this creative is sort of the anti-wiring of someone who can build something like Essentials. Meaning like they're just two different skill sets. Now, obviously, you guys have done both, and we need churches to do both, but it doesn't shock me that you would have a lot of talented, creative people from churches all over the world say, hey, we need your stuff. We don't have anything like this, because it's probably just the same reason that people that are really good at building out pipelines and sitting behind a computer are not very creative and they don't sing. They're not artistic. You know what I mean? I mean, you can have crossover, but do you think that's generally true?
Maybe, but it's funny because like in that same stereotype, I take songwriting for an example.
Yep.
A lot of people who are like more on the Myers-Briggs, like the thinker or feeler spectrum is almost kind of like what you're talking about, right? People who are a little bit more free-spirited and, they're the creative types. They want to feel their way around like a song and like, hey, I'm just going to play my guitar and kind of sing through something. But I've seen people write songs where they literally will whiteboard things out and they will take the analytical approach and they'll like brainstorm, like they'll put every single word that starts with this and, so I think it's kind of in the same sort of like ballpark of like, hey, maybe it's not as natural, but I've seen people, because of the creativity of it, if they can actually dip into the creativity side of things, can actually create really awesome, innovative processes and do. And I mean, there's churches that are, even bigger than Mercy Hill who are doing awesome things when it comes to onboarding, and they have ways of training and developing.
Right.
But maybe it's not as streamlined. And I think what's unique about ours is because we are so sending oriented and we're like, hey, we want to raise people up and send them out so that we can do a church plan every year and a campus every year. So it's like, because we want to streamline it and it's got to be a quicker process, it's kind of forced us to be a little bit more streamlined with our development process.
I think it's good, man. It's again, stress in the system creates this multiplication that we're seeing in it. Yeah. One of the things I'll ask you is, I like what you're saying too, because it's like, hey, lean into your strengths. You don't have to do it a certain way. There's multiple ways to kind of skin the cat here. You can figure out a way to do it. But to your point earlier, it is important to have some kind of process like this, because in the absence of a process like this, we end up saying we're going to do organic. And organic, a lot of times is, it's just not as scalable. I mean, it's still, I'm not saying it's not organized or something like that, but it's just not as scalable. Now we have a lot of churches that are listening to this podcast of various sizes. Like, man, you don't have to be 1,000-person church. They might have 100 people in your church, but you're wanting to grow. And you still are facing the same things. Going to 2 services, you need more teams. How is something like Essentials, which obviously I'm assuming we'd give anybody, if they want it, give it away, right? Essentials or give, for sure, right? So if anybody wants to just email us in, you can have any of the stuff we have. But we need a process, no matter what size the church is, right? Like how to, is Essentials something that can be replicated at a smaller, in a smaller environment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the heart of Essentials is just helping to take people where they're at and then kind of walk them through the process so that they're set up for success. Because think about it, anyone who comes and auditions, say they audition, on a Saturday, and then you're like, hey, and maybe not tomorrow, a week from tomorrow on Sunday, I want you to just come, bring your instrument and just check things out. It's like, man, they're not going to know where to park. They're not going to know what to bring. They're not going to know what kind of monitoring system you're using. Yeah. How do I find the songs? What is Planning Center? There's 1,000 things. But Essentials is like, hey, it's a Thursday night. You come to one of our campuses. There's not 100 people there. It's actually a really low-key environment. You're going to have an advocate, a coach, who's someone who's a team member who plays the same instrument as you, and they're going to answer every single question that you have. We're going to take you through this book, which is going to be an orientation that has every single thing you need to know. Like, hey, we use the Allen and Heath ME1 monitoring system for in-ear monitors, and most people are like, well, I haven't used that before. That's okay. We're going to show you. We're going to teach you how to use that. We're going to show you, we're going to tell you the expectation. And to your point, if you're going to duplicate something, it's like, yeah, we don't want organic. I mean, organic is fine, maybe if that's what you're going for, but if you're trying to like do what we're doing and developing leaders, whether you're a small church or a big church, to be able to give people exactly the defined bullseye. Hey, this is what we are actually trying to create. This is what we're trying to develop you in. Because if people are learning from the Big C Church, they're looking at Bethel Church, they're looking at Elevation Church, they're looking at Red Rocks, and they're thinking, oh, well, this is probably what Mercy Hill wants, right? But then they come in and they sing, or they kind of have like a vibe or a branding kind of a thing that's like different than maybe what we're going for.
Right.
It's just confusing. And then it's like, oh, to tell them that after a service, to pull them aside and say, hey, that wasn't good, or to say something
Right.
like that. It's like, man, it's just like, it doesn't necessarily boost their confidence and make them
Right.
want to get better. But if we can, on the front end, be like, hey, here is exactly where the bullseye is. Here's the box that we're defining. And we want you to create inside of this box. We want you, yes, you're bringing in a unique expression of musical artistry. And like, you have your own voice, you have your own tones, you have your own gear. But here's the box that we want you to create
Right.
in. Now people are like, okay, I can run with this because I
Yeah.
know what to, right? So it's like, it's
Yeah.
so important. And that's what Essentials is. So the point of Essentials is that, and it's like, we obviously want it to be fun. We want it to be meaningful. We want it to be valuable. But at the end of the day, whether you are a church of 6 campuses or you are one campus of, 100 people, it's like, man, if you have a musician who is, maybe they're not quite there yet, then for you to, the worship leader or somebody to take this person alongside and take them under their wing and just say, hey, here's how we do this. Here's how we do this. Here's how we do this. That's what Essentials is.
I mean, what I'm gathering from this, I think is just so good for anybody listening is like, man, if you have a reasonable expectation or a hunger to see your church grow, you've got to be able to answer the question, how do you build the worship team?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is, I mean, organically or something, something like that, where it's like, man, there's not a real answer,
Right.
then it's just going to be hard. You're gonna lag, and we need to have the and it doesn't matter how big the church is. Like, you were using in-ear monitor. You were talking about, I don't even know what you were saying, something about the M1. It sounded like you were thinking about a model of a gun or something. But whatever those monitors are, like maybe it's a small rural church. Well, that's not. They're just got a feedback monitor.
Yeah.
But that doesn't give you the excuse of not having the process laid out where people know what they're trying to do. Now, let's walk through Essentials. Okay, I'm Andrew. Okay, but let's say I'm gonna come. I've came and I've just auditioned. Well, first of all, let's go higher than that. Let's just make it super brass tacks practical. How many auditions are we doing in a year?
Yeah. Well, we're doing around probably 20.
Okay, are they self? So you do an audition whenever I ask for an audition, or do we do all calls?
We do both. We
Okay.
have an online audition process, which can be done anytime. You could submit a video, play along with the tracks that are on there.
Okay.
That's one version of it. The majority of ours, I'd say it's actually probably about 50-50.
Okay.
They'll come in, whenever. And then the other half is people who, we'll do like quarterly all-call audition. Hey, we're having a live audition at this campus.
Okay.
Come between this time and this time. And people will show up, So.
All right, we go through, and you guys are like, okay, great. You learned how to play the guitar in college, but you're rusty. It's been a while. All right, no problem, man. You're 50% of the way there. You're not at the standard that we need for playing on a Sunday yet at any of our locations. And a lot of our music, it's not like the A teams here and we have a lot of interchangeable people all over the campuses, right? All right. So then I'm just walking through this. Then I would get moved into, I'm excited. I'm bought in. You've handled the conversation with high EQ. It's given me a pathway to follow. The answer is not no. Really, almost ever. The answer is, man, we're going to keep working. We're going to keep sticking with you here. All right, boom. I'm an Essentials. You already said it. Show up on a Thursday night, and then what happens?
Yeah. So they show up Thursday night. We've already communicated with them, telling them what to bring and what to expect. We told them, hey, the first night, it's orientation for the first part. And then the second part, you're going to be on the stage already playing. So, we'll give them the songs to prepare, 2 songs to prepare in advance. They'll show up. We will hand them an Essentials booklet.
It's multiple instruments at Essentials?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've had small ones where there's only 2 instruments, and that feels different, but it's the same thing, you know. And then we've had literally where there's been, you know, 2 full bands where we have to have an A team and a B team that rotate. So it doesn't really matter however many instruments. For every instrument, it's a 1-to-1 ratio of a coach to somebody coming through Essentials. So if there's a bass player and a drummer, we'll ask one of our bass players on our team and one of our drummers, hey, will you come and coach? Which side, you know, bonus is like, man, this is an awesome opportunity for them to use gifts, for them to pour out, right? Coaches love this.
And the coaches are signing up for 4 weeks.
Yep.
It's because that's Essentials runs 4 weeks.
That's right. That's right. So we have, during orientation, there's usually requires 2 staff members, ideally, like a campus worship leader or Joe, who is over all of our development and kills it. You know, so one of them is running orientation with all of the people, and then the other one is running a coach's orientation at the same time and giving them some expectations. Hey, you know, here's how to give feedback. Here's how to, like, here's what we're looking for.
Right.
Here's how to take notes.
You don't just crush someone's soul.
That's right. That's right. Which the culture is high feedback, but also high EQ. It's like, man, you know, so, okay,
artists can be a little prickly, dude, about their craft. You know, so you gotta.
It's a vulnerable thing.
Yeah, you're right.
You know? It's extremely vulnerable. I mean, if somebody's coming in and they're singing and you're like, that was terrible. It's just like, okay, I will never see you again, probably.
Right. All right.
But I mean, so you have to just understand that, which musicians typically understand it because they've been on the other side of it.
And stuff. Yeah. I'm not stereotyping you guys at all, man.
No, of course you're not.
No, of course I'm not. I would never do that.
But yeah, I mean, man, the coaches who are in our Essentials do an amazing job with this. Like 100% of them always do an awesome job with this.
Great.
So we'll do orientation, 45 minutes. We'll go through, this lays out expectations, values. This is who we are. This is what we're looking for.
Right.
And then we'll say, hey, go ahead and get up on stage, and we're going to go ahead and play through it. And we're going to play through the 2 songs once or twice, right? Mm-hmm. And each time that they play, we'll take a 15-minute break after that, and we'll do one-on-one feedback coaching. Hey, This is what you did awesome. Try playing it this way. Try singing it this way. Try changing this. And getting people to even just see the value in holistically, like, man, visually, you know, like, hey, 80% of communication or more is nonverbal. So like if you're standing up there and you're just like this the whole time, you know, it's like, what are you communicating? Are you truly passionate about what you're doing?
Yeah.
So all of that, man, there's just so many things, and we've tried to define these things and put them in writing in either our Essentials book or in our Worship Leader Essentials book. And so that's kind of in a nutshell. And then the following 3 weeks after that, it's just kind of more of that. It's like, hey, stage time. We go through the book a little bit more. We'll give feedback. You know, it's just kind of all of the things. So,
man, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things I wanted to ask you while I had you on was the role of songwriting in a worship ministry. Because you and I, it's funny, you and I have kind of gone back and forth on this some over the years. I feel like I've got it in my head now as I see it more in the way that you see it as a leadership development tool in some ways. Like, so I think one of the things that I have a hard time with when churches write their own music is what I see in the room is that most times the best responses we get in worship are songs that are incredibly familiar. That means they're on the radio or they were at youth camp 10 years ago. You know, like they're just kind of that type of song. They're older, you know, and so that's obviously the enemy of new. Now, if you take that to its logical conclusion, we would never write any new songs, right? So I know that, and I'm not advocating for that. But that can be like, man, when the church writes a new song, you kind of have 2 strikes. Number one, it's new. Number 2, it's not on the radio or something where other people can hear it. Yeah. So it's really new. And people are only coming to church, whatever, I don't know, a couple of times out of the month now, you know, when you just look at the whole gambit of the whole year, many people. So they may not hear the song but once a year or something, you know, so it's just kind of, but you really opened my eyes to another aspect of the value of songwriting in terms of attracting talent, getting people excited, keeping the team excited. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think a good example of this is, I think right around 2021, I got an email from a guy. He was in Canada, and he said, hey, I found you guys through Spotify, and I love your music. I've been listening to it. I'm actually going to Greensboro, or I had a couple of options, but I chose Greensboro because I wanted to come to Mercy Hill. He lived in Canada. He was over the worship department at his pretty small church, and felt like, man, this could be a really cool opportunity for him to connect with us, to learn, take it back, right?
Yeah.
And so he was coming to grad school at UNCG. So that was kind of like one example, Now the story ends where actually his plans changed and he didn't come out here. But that's a great example of what almost could have happened.
It could have been a really cool story, John.
Sorry.
It could have been a great story.
Yeah. Strike that one. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that's just like an example of kind of this conversation, which is like, man, people, I said it on the last episode, but like when people see something that is valuable and something that is moving and life-changing, especially I feel like a musician would fall into this category, they just want to be part of it. Like, man, if I am a musician and there is one band over here, one church that's doing something that's like awesome and impactful, and I see movement, and then there's another one that just kind of feels like, hey, maybe they're not quite to the level. Maybe it's just not as impactful or moving, and it just feels like thrown together or something like that. I do think that the musician is going to gravitate towards, man, I want to make a difference with my music, and I feel like their music is making a difference. I want to be part of it. I want to do what they're doing. It's it's good. And like you said, man, there's like, that is one facet of the songwriting. I mean, we I feel like over the last few years, some of the songs have become pretty big anthems for our church. You know? I mean, I think Celebration Awaits was that during, like shortly after COVID. It was like a song that you said resonated pretty deeply with you, and I think a lot of people in our church. I Surrender was kind of one of those anthems that I think really people latched onto. And then I think, even recently, like we wrote this song called Always Be, which is like, it says all of the language that we use around Mercy Hill all the time. So if you think about it, songwriting is...
What's Always Be? I don't know the name sometimes.
That's the one we did yesterday.
Faithful.
Yeah.
Faithful You've Always Been. Yeah, that's very near to our
Talks
ethos.
about the orphans.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, man, songs are like sermons people take with them. And it's like, man, if we're as a church, think about it like this. This is where our church is. This is what our church is studying. This is the season we're going through. If we can write a song specifically for that season, for our church, that is such a gift to the church, right?
Yeah.
Most worship songs are written by a handful of people in Nashville or in Charlotte or in Reading. Like literally most of the songs that we sing. So what that means is, they're really, really good and awesome songs, but a lot of times they're also just not as tailored towards our church and our season. And so like when people, obviously if you play a song and like write a song for your church and it's just the disparity in quality is so much, it's like, man, this is just not good, then you shouldn't do it. Right. But like, if you have that and you have the team and you have the talent and you have the ability to do that, it's such a gift. And a byproduct of that is your point. It's like, man, it just attracts talent when people, when you can put out a record or you can put out a song, and musicians are just like drawn to that. I think, and so I think. Well,
and it's not. They're drawn to it in a way that is not. Anything can be abused, but that's not self-serving. I mean, that's getting a chance to use your gift in a way that is making a broader impact. Who wouldn't be excited about that? Yeah, I think I've gone back and forth on the write your own song stuff. Primarily because, by de facto, I've gone back and forth, meaning I can see both sides of it, right? Yeah. So like on the one side, I totally agree with what you're saying. Like Celebration Awaits, the new song you guys have now. These songs really do become anthems for us, and they mark seasons. I think that, I pray it be at Mercy Hill for 30 years. I think some of these songs are going to, we're going to look back and they're going to mark moments in our church. And that's just all awesome. The second part of it though, the way, my other side of my brain says, man, people are new. They come in and the songs are so new that it's hard for them to engage.
Yeah.
And they don't hear them anywhere else. And we've tried to remedy some of that, releasing them, trying to get them out in front of people,
but you see that no matter what song, when we play, Holy Forever, which is one of the biggest songs in the church, even the first week we played that,
Yeah.
there's still a good amount of people who are like,
Right.
they don't actually listen to the radio.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're listening to podcasts or whatever.
Well, it's
So
because you already said, 70% of them are women and only 50% of the church is women. So, I mean, you're not going to, you're going to have a lot of people that aren't listening to Christian pop, rock,
and there's so
whatever,
there's so many songs. There's so many really good songs out there. And you could use that as an argument as, well, why write songs for your church when there's so many good ones? But at the same time, it's also an argument for saying, well, hey, if people don't know these anyways,
right?
You know what I mean? What is the difference if you teach them a new?
But you gotta admit, to me that would be very true, like in Seattle or something like that. I actually would just like 100% agree with you. And I think some of those churches out there, like Driscoll and them, they just literally were writing all their own music.
Yeah,
and I think. Because I remember hearing some of their band, and they're like, "This is a '90s grunge band that is their worship band," But I do think in the South, if you grab back, there's just like a nostalgia of the Christian K-Love kind of youth groupy kind of stuff that I think you're right. If you're looking at a top 100 like today, people aren't going to know them. But when I'm saying you grab for songs that were maybe 15 years ago. There is something that happens in the room where people just kind of know the song, even 100%. If they're newer.
You got to have a good balance. You can't.
And you guys do a good job with this.
We would never. So in terms of the like cadence of new songs, I mean, we don't typically add a new song but once a month. We wouldn't add a new song every week because of the exact reason you're saying.
Yeah.
It's just like, man, you're alienating. You're kind of wasting 5 to 10 minutes, however long the song is, that week to a degree, because people are tripping over the lyrics and just trying to not look foolish while they're trying to learn the song that they don't know. You know what I mean? So we know that's like a give and take. Like, man, if we got to add one new song every month, so we add about 12 songs per year, 12 to 15. And if we're going to do that, we need to be really strategic and intentional. How many of these are going to be written by us, and how many of them are going to be, man, these are just awesome songs that the church is singing right now. And we used to try to be a little bit more like, hey, let's make it exactly this number. And now it's just like, man, if we write a song, if we write 10 brand new songs, but they're not just like really resonating and they don't feel like these are the songs we need to introduce, we won't introduce any of them, And if Chris Tomlin is the one writing all of these bangers right now, we're like, these are the awesome songs.
How old is Chris Tomlin?
I still don't know.
Too. I'm joking, man.
I still don't know.
I'm joking. Okay, yeah. No, I get that, man. And I think for me, like the scales kind of really tip for me in that conversation when I got it in my head that how good it is for the team to go through the process of writing. It's energy infusing. Man, going and recording, that's energy infusing. It's a chance for you guys. And we have seen this. I mean, y'all got some of these songs have really gone, I mean, we live, where we're thinking about Reading and Charlotte and all that, but I mean, on a smaller scale, but still a significant scale, you guys have been able to have an impact where there have been major people that have picked up some of y'all's music. And so, I mean, how exciting is that, for the team?
We get a good amount of requests, via email or whatever, asking for chord charts so they could play in their church too. So that's also just like a really cool aspect. Oh
yeah. I mean, I think about our comms team. Like we think about, we have a big emphasis on adoption and foster care, right? And so they created all these graphics around Chosen and, just all that kind of stuff. Well, then, we had a bunch of churches in North Carolina pick that stuff up. They just literally used all the same stuff. Yeah. We're like, man, we don't care.
Yeah. It's great.
I mean, we think it's awesome. We celebrated that. Like, dude, go take it. It's just fun to see that stuff get multiplied. It's got to be energy infusing for y'all's team as well. So I really love that idea. And the churches don't have to be huge to do this. One of our church plants, they put out songs and they were and trying to use it in the same way, right? And they're a smaller church, 100 person church.
Yeah. And I think something that's good to note is like, yes, we are now, obviously 12 years old, and we started putting out music like around 2020. But before that, and I'm sure you remember this, but like early days, early church planning, Burr Mill days, I had like this kind of fire in me. I'm like, man, I want to write these songs, introduce these songs at Mercy Hill. I want us to record them. And we're a church. We're just a baby church plant, And I remember you pulling me aside, like, man, maybe one day that'll be us, but that's just not where we're at right now. And I remember like kind of not understanding it fully and just kind of being like, man, but I want to introduce more songs and I want it to be
right.
And you said the same thing. You're like, man, people don't know these songs, and we're just not going to put a lot of energy into this right now. And I think it was right, but as maybe a word of encouragement for worship leaders who are like, man, I want to write and release music, but maybe my lead pastor isn't on board with that yet,
He's
know?
stifling me. He's
yeah.
oppressing me in my creativity. Okay, just say it what it is, John.
No, I think that there's just like a very real, you have your mind wrapped around the entire organization in a way the worship leader can't.
Yeah.
And I think that I was at a songwriting retreat last month, and it's like, that was one of the questions worship leaders were asking, like, man, what do you do?
Right.
When not trying to cast shade on my pastor, but like they don't see the value in it, or they're not there yet. And I'm like, hey, it's like, that's okay. Like, you need to be on the same page with your pastor. And just like for us, it took literally 7 years before we got to the point. Not that you didn't see value in it, but you didn't think that was where we needed to spend energy.
Right.
And so like, man, that's okay. But then you did,
Yeah.
And so I think that that's just like one of those things that I would say, if you're a worship leader and you're kind of in that seat, like, man, try to instead of say, hey, how can we make it to where we're releasing music? Instead, hey, what is the church's vision and mission? And at what point in time will releasing music actually serve that?
Right.
And think about it from that perspective. And it may be 7 years from now. And like, we just need to be okay with that, because that's not what we're...
You guys did, right? I mean, y'all wrote some of those songs around missions, and I mean, some of the songs that we don't really do them now.
Yeah.
But I remember some of our favorite ones. I remember doing, what's the one I'm thinking of? The
No One Like You.
In All the Earth.
Oh, In All the Earth. That was one of the very first...
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing In All the Earth in Peru in year 2 at Mercy Hill. I was singing it down there. I mean, so... Yeah, and I think too, part of that nuance of that is, and you lived this, man. I mean, we just had a tiger by the tail too. I mean, you talk about a church that goes from 0 to 1,000 in 2 years.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of energy for a lot of things. But I do think that even looking back on that now, I think some of that, probably my resistance to some of it, came out of a limited mindset of thinking like, man, we only have, so much energy, which is true. You only have so much energy, but God seems to multiply some of our efforts when we're living in our sweet spot too, so you're not necessarily getting drained by writing and that kind of thing. So we could talk more about that, but I want to transition. Let's talk about this for a minute. One of the things I see from y'all's team that I think is very important, again, this whole thing is about practical ways and what it looks like to develop worship team members. That can be the bottleneck. You're not going to outgrow your worship team. You're just not, so, well, I guess I'll say it the other way. Once your worship team kind of stops, that's where that's the lid. I mean, you're just not going to be able to keep going. So, one of the things I've seen you guys do is y'all have created a very attractive community, where people want to be around each other. We say this about all serve teams at Mercy Hill, but this is certainly true with you guys. People view it as another community group, I would imagine, where people see the relational dynamic on that team as probably some of their strongest relationships in the whole church.
Yeah.
Certainly musical volunteers, worship team volunteers, they put in the highest amount of energy and effort of any volunteer teams in the church. Generally speaking, just rehearsals and getting here early and all that stuff. How have you guys tried to really foster community on that team where it's not transactional? These guys are cogs in the wheel, come play, leave. But it's, they're buying into the relationships on the team.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm glad you find our team attractive. So
it's led by you, man.
Thank you.
So
I think part of that is almost just innate, because being around musicians, there's like a energy that comes from that. You know what I mean? Like, people are already passionate about music if they're playing at this level. Yeah. And they do love to be around other musicians, right? So that's part of that, is like already where maybe some other serve teams don't already, there's not a lot in common naturally. I think there is that's natural. And then I think what we do to kind of foster that is, because you're right, like, if you are around people for as long as we are around the worship team and it's not enjoyable, people will not stick around.
Right.
So we have to be very intentional about, people who are onboarding onto the team. Yes, it's like you need to have the talent, right? But also we have an interview for every single team member who joins the team, like an hour-long interview where we are going to just ask you, hey, share your story, share your faith story, share what are you interested in, what are your hobbies. We know that we're going to spend a lot of time and that our team spends a lot of time. So there does have to be like a cultural fit, Yeah. And so that's one part of like what we do to kind of foster that like out of the gate. But also we do a lot of like intentional things. Like for example, tonight we have, a team night. So like, hey, once a month or once every 5 or 6 weeks, the teams from all of the campuses come together and, we'll cast vision. We'll do tonight's actually like a Teamsgiving. So like we'll just eat dinner together. And so we'll
Teamsgiving. I told you guys, you're so creative, man.
Thank you. So yeah, like we'll just spend time. I mean, literally just sitting around the table eating, and like, we are really, really big on that, just like on culture side of things. And so it's like, man, before you're a drummer, you are a person. You are a child of God. You're a valuable team member.
Good,
So it's like, that is a big part of our ethos, and just knowing that like, man, if you are injured and you can't drum for 6 months, you're still a valuable person on our team. And because that's literally the scenario of somebody on our team right now. And it's like, man, you're still invited. They'll come and hang out in the green room, during one of the benefits of having a multiple services and the way that we do it is that like, man, we don't require our team to sit in every sermon. They are required to sit in one sermon.
Right.
But like during the sermon time, that's where usually the band will go to the green room, and like it'll just be an awesome time. Like people just get to hang out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be a little bit more structured. We'll like have prayer time, or sometimes we'll have these like little cards and we'll go around and ask each other like get to know you kind of questions and stuff like that. But a lot of more times than not, it's like we're all just hanging out and talking about things that we love to talk about, and it's just like it's just intentionality and like, man, we like each other. But I will say, a huge thing that we do that fosters this that you probably wouldn't necessarily tie to that is preparation. Like ever since COVID, we don't have a weeknight practice anymore. It's like you show up Sunday morning and you have 50 minutes to practice everything for the service. And the only way you can do that is if people show up really prepared.
Right.
And the only way you can do that is if you do a really good job of preparing people and equipping people. Hey, this is the song we're playing. This is the key we're playing. It has correct chord charts. This is the exact way that we're playing this song. This is how we're playing the transitions. So people show up and there's not a lot of curveballs. So people come ready to go. And because of that, it's like it's a lower stress, Obviously there's weeks where it's like, oh no, there's a buzz in the sound system, or this isn't working right. But by and large, we have an awesome production team who also gets there very early and sets everything up, and they do a great job of making sure that stuff doesn't happen. And so our team is able to get in, play their songs, do transitions. And then it's like, man, it's pretty relaxed environment, and just people get to hang out with each other. And I think that is like one of the most important aspects of having a good team culture, just being able to like get to know each other, hang out, value relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah, you don't think about it, but as soon as you say it out loud, it's like, yeah, that's true. I mean, high stress environments are sort of the enemy of relationship a lot of times. For sure. I mean, things can be forged in a high stress environment, but man, when you're just like on edge, people want to snap. There's no way they can kind of let the guard down. And so that's really important. All right, John, while we got you, man, I want to finish this out. Maybe just like spend one more minute here. So just give them to us quick. I asked you about these. But man, just thinking about hacks, tips, technology, other people to follow. If people are listening to this and they want to develop their worship leader, they want to develop them, man, give us just a few things you're excited about or following, hacks, tips, whatever. Give us 3 things that you could turn us on to now as we get done.
I would say one is, so I mentioned that post that we made earlier.
Yeah, the Essentials post.
So as a response to that, kind of following in the Breaking Barriers mold here, we created a group. It's a Mercy Hill. It's called the Resourcing Community, the Worship Resourcing Community. And basically everything, all of our essentials books, all of our handbooks, all of our we have tons of processes and procedures on documents, basically just giving all of that out.
Yeah.
So, the group is, it's cool because there's like worship leaders from other countries and stuff like that. and people asking questions on there and stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool community, and it's a great resource. All right,
so let's make sure, Wes, that we have that on the Breaking Barriers site when this podcast launches, so that y'all can then link up to that, so people can go right from our private Facebook group to y'all's. Okay,
cool. Another resource is the Way of Worship, which I think I was talking to you about this before, but friend of mine, Aaron Williams, and a group of other people. I'm part of this. I'm part of the leadership team of this. It's only about a year old, but it's like it's kind of a mentorship, sort of a community of like worship leaders, songwriters, creatives. But this is a really cool resource if you're looking for like, hey, I want community and like a cohort kind of a setting for development and training and stuff like that. So this is a really cool resource that I would recommend. And then other than that, man, I would just recommend, I mean, there's a bunch of, things that we use like every week and have been for years that maybe are resources people don't use. I would just kind of like throw them out. Those like, multitracks.com. They have more than just the stems for songs that we play along to. They have like pads and stuff like that. Like, if your keys player uses main stage or, Logic or whatever it is like that, there's patches and like pads and stuff like that you can download from that. Playback is kind of an offshoot of that, and rehearsal mix is cool. But playback is like if you're wanting to use in-ear monitors and play along to tracks, but maybe you don't want to do Ableton, maybe that overwhelms you. Ableton has got a lot. Ableton is like, it does way more than most churches use it for. And so a more user-friendly version of that is playback. It's free. I mean, there's like, subscriptions and stuff like that, but that's a really cool tool and resource too. So
awesome, man. Well, dude, thank you. I have no idea what any of that is, the last few things you said, but somebody does. So, all right, John, thank you for your time. Hey guys, just so you know, we do have a private Facebook group. That's kind of part of our process here. So jump on breakinggrowthbarriers.com. You can get to the private Facebook group there, and it's just everything about growing and going, the practical nitty gritty. So we'd love to see you on there. Thanks.